When we have a reference batch, we want to be aware of how we name this reference batch because it is going to allow us to more seamlessly go back to this information and ensure that whomever is needing to review it and reconcile or perhaps audit that information, that they have a clear understanding of what each batch contains. How do we do that? That is done by us making sure that our practice or organization has a naming convention that is consistent, meaning the format of the reference batch is consistent across all users. So you will want to make sure that you have created a consistent naming convention so that everyone on your team is utilizing the same format for how they are creating their reference batch. So I'm going to click to access my batch list, and I'm going to click to add a new batch. And within this area, this is where I'm going to make the choice of the title that will be listed on my reference batch. And so the recommendation is going to be for the date of that batch. So the date in which you want this batch to have the information completed. And so if we create our reference batch, we can include the date, and we can also include what we believe will be entered in to this reference batch. For example, if I am providing front desk support, perhaps I'm doing things like charges and payments and maybe scheduling, then I might put something that simply says front desk, or perhaps I might indicate that I am putting in charges, because that is my responsibility. So if I know that I am the one responsible for charges, I want to make sure everyone who is going to access this reference batch has a clear picture of what they would find within this reference batch based on what I am responsible for the individual entering charges. The same is true if I am the one responsible for front desk as a whole and I'm doing charges and perhaps payments. Then I want to maybe input, instead of charges, maybe I am putting in the name or the title of that role that I serve in. So for example, it might be receptionist, it might be front desk, whatever the title is that associates to that role. When we know what that individual might be doing from moment to moment in that a common day for that role, then we would want that description to include. So for example, if I know that charges and payments, scheduling, and so many more things are there, we might very simply put front desk or receptionist or scheduler. They're listed underneath our function here for the description. So if I start with charges, and I'm going to notice that within this reference batch add or modify screen, I have a few other options that show up as required. And how do I know that? Because the cell will be highlighted in yellow. So the description and the batch date are the most important. And so I'm going to use today's date as the same date that I put in to my batch date, as well as the date that I put into my description. And so I have a very clear picture that within this batch, on this date, I'm going to find charges, and there are charges that were entered on September 2nd. I also have the ability within here to open and close my batch. I'll also see that I can input a total. So if I know I received a specific amount of money and I want to input that total amount, then I would be able to know when this amount does not reconcile. So if I received $500 across the front desk and I want to input that $500 here under my total for the batch, when I go to input this total for the $500 that was received into the appropriate patient's accounts, the software would alert me if the amount does not match. That is the reconciliation process that the software is trying to support when you're using the reference batch total. That is not a required field. You'll also notice the date of service is here as well. This is going to create the date of service automatically on all transactions entered into with using this batch. It will automatically use whatever date that is input into the date of service area. It will input that date as the date of service if you're putting in things such as charges. The same is true for the receive date, the facility, rendering, billing, referring, and supervising providers. These are defaults. If you put any additional information in these areas, the data that is input, the transactions that are input into the software under this reference batch will reflect any of the defaults that are input into this area. You can also restrict what is allowed to be entered under this batch. For example, if I am not responsible for payment posting, then I would not likely be wanting to have an allowable function that lets me do payment posting. If I am only allowed to or responsible for charge posting and patient registration, then I want to ensure that these two are selected. You can also input additional notes. So if there's other information that you want to input here to help you clarify something that might need to be considered related to this batch, you can put that note here at the bottom. And as soon as I create that new batch, I will notice it will give me an automatic status of open, which means I have not considered this day to be finalized or done or complete. The batch remains open until I consider it to be final or complete. And you'll notice I have this little link connected and it's green, which lets me know that I am attached currently to this batch. And because I'm attached to this batch, any defaults that I have selected or entered in underneath the batch details will be included on any transactions. So for example, I input the batch default of September 2nd, 2024, that is going to automatically show up on all of my future transactions. You'll also notice here that I see numbers and it's going to adjust according to what I have input. Over here, I see they're all zeros because I haven't put any transactions in yet. As soon as I start to input transactions, these numbers are going to shift and adjust, and that will start to accrue the amounts that I am putting in throughout that day. And once I finalize my day, I will have the ability to close that batch out. I'll also notice here that I've got item set to 0. That is going to also accrue as I continue inputting more information as the day goes on.